either. The playwrights, the poets, the authors and scriptwriters, they felt, I mean, you normally do feel the spirit of times, the winds, and actually write about them. Do you feel that you wrote sufficiently, or were sort of extremist kind of phenomena, things that deterred you from doing it? I was young, I was a student. This is the real war today, the microphone. People can't hear us. I was a student of literature and theatre. I hadn't written my first play at that time, at least not for a professional stage. But I think that there were already various cells then. I admit that the war of attrition molded various things in my ideology, and it was just confirmed in the Yom Kippur War, especially about the rank and file and the sort of the regular soldier in the field, but especially if you visited on the side of the canal, the various outposts and the positions there, very similar to the Beit Sha'an ones and the Golan Height ones. There was that kind of hotbed system that immediately it was the Golani, and then other people came in, and then other people, and it was like a musical beds. And that was, by the way, the first time I came across drugs. They were in the positions along the canal, that, the soldiers who'd left their homes behind and they came there. All sorts of diseases of Israeli society that before that everyone thought that the combat soldiers were so amazing and that they were in the army, and suddenly the numbers were dwindling, and people in the home front, the numbers were increasing. I mean, there were all sorts of satires about the controlling higher echelons of power in those days, and as if things were falling apart. And I remember I was a soldier at Tel Aviv University, and I was asked to write a satirical program. And the Students' Association was then actually run by Likud, Limor Livnat, Kleiner, who have now later on became members of Knesset, etc. But I was considered to be left-winger in my views, and I thought, how could I express my position and my ideology if not at the university? And I thought, wow. So I came up and I met with 3 other students from the theatre department, and it took exactly 3 minutes before we were thrown off the stage. And Yafa Yalkoni was supposed to come and perform after us, and so we were thrown off, but we felt very humiliated when we got off. But Yafa Yalkoni got up and said, it's beautiful material that you wrote, but your timing. And then she got up and sang that very ideological song about Bab el Wad. So I think that it wasn't really savvy in those days to do that. And I think that people that the depression was so bad in those days and so deep that even if you said things pure, people couldn't accept it. And it's true what Dina said. I remember myself as a high school student in the Six-Day War. My father was in the Second World War in the Red Army, and my mother was a Holocaust survivor. And I remember people talking about a second Holocaust at home, and I was only 17, but I believed in the incredible clout of the IDF and their power, and I was mobilized, after those and joined the army under the glory of the Six-Day War, the aftermath, that glorious aftermath. And I don't quite, I think that soldier who's supposed to cross the Suez Canal and and that, you know, when you walk along the batteries of the missiles and someone keeps shooting from one side, and we were sort of putting on a kind of disguise as if we were so many, the Egyptians, we were trying to pull the wool over their eyes, but it never. And it was as if, you know, they knew exactly what we were doing, and they knew that what our forces were like. And we found ourselves sort of entrenched there, running between their barrages of mortar fire. And to go back in my mind, either from Bet Sha'an or from the Golan Heights, and to go back to Tel Aviv after everything that was going on there, or along, you know, the Suez Canal, and to see the gap between and the distance that there was between Tel Aviv and in the media as well, and these gaps between things that were happening actually per se in the field, and talking. And you knew that when you go back to the canal, that the work there is depressing and grey and dismal and difficult. It was as if people were living in some kind of euphoria in civil life. And I remember going to some kind of course in the army and becoming very friendly with one soldier. And the following day he was killed or wounded, instead of that wonderful party that everyone seemed to be celebrating on the home front. It was quite strange, the difference. And so therefore there was such a horrific wave of anti that was aroused later on.
When did you choose to write a play, the play Gorodish? Well, the play is actually about Gorodish, but about Gorodish as an image. The play is actually almost a biography of my contemporaries. Before Gorodish, I wrote a few plays. You know, when I was a soldier in the army, I wrote plays about the army. And I arrived at Gorodish, and I think it was the 19th year after the Yom Kippur War. And I was sitting just like everybody else, and I was reading again the 18th year, 17th year, 19th year commemoration pages. And I heard about Gorodish. I mean, I'd heard about him before. There was a book about him. And I was amazed to realize that Gorodish, when he was stamped as the enemy of the public, he was 43. And I was 43 at the time when I was reading about him. And that was when it suddenly hit me that the biography of those young soldiers, I read all that, but then I started thinking about the top echelon. So I started a very thorough research into it. And with all due modesty, I must say that many documents and things that were only published recently, I was able to put hands on them even before that. And what I found amazing was that when people talked about the politicization of the generals, the war of the generals around the Yom Kippur War, etc., you know, you read through the material and you see that all through the years, these things existed. They were instilled in the military, commanders who were politically connected to politicians who were outside the system, politicians and ministers putting pressure on one general or another whom they wanted to become chief of staff, and others pressurizing someone else. And this whole naivety of total separation between military and politics, that was something that never existed, and that's what I found out during that research that I did. The second thing that I realized while I was reading through it was that, first of all, I was in Golani. My platoon commander is actually sitting here. And I found out that, in fact, all the war doctrines of the Israeli Armored Corps, when it was first established, were based on Wehrmacht, war doctrines. Now, or fighting doctrines. And this is something that people felt uncomfortable with, being a state of Holocaust survivors, etc. But I think they also adopted the distance between the soldier and the commander, and we used many quotes that we heard, such as, "We don't want a thinking soldier, we want an operating soldier," and all kinds of things that I found out later, and not having been aware of it throughout my army service. Now, in the play, there's some character saying to Gorodish, when he complains that everybody hates him after the Yom Kippur War, that he has been wronged. So that character says to him, "They liked you when they did because they saw themselves in you. And now they hate you because they see themselves in you, and they also see in you the illusion that they had had." And from that point of view, Gorodish was, for me, a kind of something to hang on to provide a kind of semi-surreal biography of a whole period of time. And I had defined the play at the time as a documentary fantasy, which is a contradiction in terms, of course, and that was on purpose. But the thing is that it's not another play about the war, who did what to whom, where was Arik, where was Bren, who refused, who didn't refuse, but rather more of a panorama of the entire period from my point of view. And now someone here is saying that it's not true that the entire doctrine came from the Wehrmacht. Dan Miron is saying that it isn't true. Okay, not everything, most of them though. And I'm sorry, we can't hear the interpolations from the audience, so we can't translate them. Brigadier General Asher Levy is saying that it's completely wrong and it's just rubbish. So in the next revision of Gorodish, you should introduce Asher Levy as a character. First of all, I don't know if they're going to have room for another, or rather budget for another actor, because, there have been so many budgetary cuts in the theaters recently. But let me tell you, when we performed it 20 years ago, and by the way, it's going to be played again, going to be performed again, and the moderator is saying, if you buy a ticket, you'll get Uzi Elam's book as well. I, got to talk with many people such as Chich and Musa Peled and others. So let me just say in my defense that the knowledge that I manifested in the warfare doctrine of the Armored Corps were completely supported by them. Okay, that's very good in theory.